So, Jose Maria, we were speaking not too long ago about the Great Reset. I was wondering, did you see the quote they had? It's old now, but about you'll own nothing, but you'll be happy, or something like that.
So you don't have to possess anything. It is just living, breathing. That's all. That's enough. Well, that's an optimistic point of view, I think.
I think that's their idea. But my question is, if you don't own it, well, who will? Because somebody has to own the things.
Well, it makes me think about Gordon Gekko in Wall Street when he says, I don't create, I own. And we see that in the extremes, both extremes get in touch sometimes.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It happens as well. Yes, of course, I know the book. You know,
yeah, I know. We were talking about it not too long ago.
I've just finished this book. Well,
Okay.
I knew about it. I didn't find the moment to read it. It's an interesting book. It is a book co-authored by Klaus Schwab and Thierry Malleret. I'm sorry, but I don't speak French. So if I haven't said this properly, I apologize. Well, this the whole title is COVID-19, the Great Reset. So COVID itself is a part of the reflection contained in this book, of course.
But obviously this was being planned way before COVID came on the scene. Right?
Well, they say Mr. Schwab is the founder of the World Economic Forum. He's a quite well-known person in the world of ideas and, of course, political and economic power. Well, the book was published in June in the year 2020. They say they started to write once the pandemic started. But
that means they came up with all these ideas very quickly. You would hope that if the idea is to reshape society, that at least they would have more than a few months to think about these ideas.
It's impossible, of course, I agree. You may write fast, like I do. But first of all, you need thinking about something. And I see you are right. There is a deep reflection coming from the side of the authors. And well, they admit, for instance, I write that some of the troubles we were seeing in our societies before the implosion of the pandemic were there. Rising inequalities, sense of unfairness, deepening geopolitical division, political polarization. Well, this is not something new. What they say is...
sorry, these are very highly complex problems. So the idea that we could change it easily without making it worse, it's more likely that we make it worse than make it better with any big changes.
If you can change easily our world and solve these problems, I give you my vote in the next elections.
Well, it would have happened already. If it were that easy, no doubt it would have happened.
No, it's extremely complex. Well, in this book, the authors try to put us in motion. They want us to think. Of course, I think they even are provocative. I don't think all the ideas contained in the book are supported by the authors. They really say something must change in our world. And well, the COVID-19 is a good occasion for that. And of course, they mention these big troubles we have before the pandemic. Even they admit that it is true. I agree that the state of the world today is on average considerably better than it was in the past. I think we can only say yes. Of course, there is inequality. Of course, there is people suffering, poverty. But well, we are almost 8 billion people in the world. And we have to admit the evolution of the world as a globalized place in which we live. They're quite critical with globalization and how the world is ruled. Well, of course, there is not a government for the world.
Yeah.
The closest institution we have for that is United Nations. Well, of course, the World Health Organization is an agency of the United Nations, but they don't have a hard power like states have.
Yeah, exactly.
But even so, in this world, in the last 80 years, I think things have been done, always can be done in a better way, but they have been done properly, I think. And well, they criticize, they are critical, and they even suggest we need a new social contract. What do you think about this?
Can you explain again? A social contract?
A social contract, yes. Do you know what a social contract is?
You can remind me.
Well, our social contract is the base on which our society is built. I mean, in a state, for me, the social contract is contained in our constitution.
Okay, the relationship between the individuals and the state itself, no?
Well, of course, in the base of this social contract, we will always find individuals.
Yeah.
We are the base as individuals of something collective.
Yeah.
Well, by now, this has been the way in which we have worked on the way in which our societies are evolving. And they propose a change of our social contract.
What change?
Well, we should pay more attention to inequality. We should help vulnerable people. Well, I think we don't really have changed our social contract for that. I think in advanced societies like ours, we are working on that.
But how, so when they say we need to change the social contract to help vulnerable people or inequality, what exactly do they mean? How do you do this?
Well, mainly
because we are trying to help, no? Generally speaking, at least, we are making progress in helping.
Well, I think so, and I think we must find a solid balance between public and private, collective and individuals.
Individual, yeah.
And well, I think what they support is a more intense activity coming from the public, from the state, from governments. Well, we have seen this as well in the pandemic. We've seen that they speak about public debt. States are doing much more, and for doing much more, they have to issue debt because they need money too.
Exactly.
We have seen that really, if governments were important in our societies, spending, ruling, now spend and rule even more. We were confined, and that 99% of the population admitted that, and that was enough.
That's true.
We see as well, I see it at least, a more intense relation between the states and companies, the private sector. This is not something new. It was happening before, but now the truth is that this relation is much more intense. But in the end, what I see is they suggest that states should rule more and spend more and take more care of vulnerable people.
Okay, is that the main idea of the book, that the states, the public sector should have more control and take more action, or not?
It is one of them. In 15 minutes, the book is much more complex than this. This is a simple idea of the whole book. But yes, that's one of the main points.
And what's their idea about the private sector then? So less power, less money in the private sector?
Well, no, of course, it is an important part of the book about taxation. That if public spending is higher, the issuance of debt should be higher as well, and of course the taxes we pay. And well, even they refer the rates imposed in the United States or UK after Second World War, close to 100%. They don't say we should go so up, but they mention that. In the line of Thomas Piketty. Perhaps we could speak next week or in a different episode about his book. I have, it is a thick book, have read this book, and even have written a short essay on it. And well,
what was the title again? We spoke about it before, but
Capital and Ideology.
That was it. I remember we spoke about it.
And well, and the first part of this book was Capitalism in the 21st Century. He's a young and quite famous French economist. And he's, perhaps I think in this case, in the Great Reset, they follow Piketty's ideas. And well, environment is an interesting topic. Just the last, or one of the last ideas in the book is that we should set a new order in our priorities, and the priority number one for them is climate change.
Oh, wow.
And the fight against climate change. And you know, at the same time, the green recovery. I mean, all this huge public and private spending coming after the pandemic. You know, the European Union has a program, Next Generation, to support the recovery, and it is based especially on green recovery and digital transformation. So they agree, they consider these are main topics, and they say something that I really agree. I think it is something it's a good idea. It is not new. It doesn't come from their minds, but they think that GDP is not enough to measure how evolutive our societies are.
Yeah, okay. We put you
Yes, we should not only see the economic activity. Well, you know, the American Constitution mentions that happiness, or the search for happiness is one of the purposes of Americans' political order. So yes, I agree. We don't have to pay attention exclusively to the wealth we generate, the wealth we spend. I think there are intangible values that are at least as important as crematistic or economic values. And well, of course I agree. So summing up, well, of course we can do things better.
Nobody will disagree with that.
Oh no, of course. Of course we don't like inequality.
No.
Of course we don't like seeing this political division in our societies. They try to warn about that if we follow this way, that there could be an explosion of violence.
Oh, wow.
I think that is one of the main messages of this book as well.
Okay.
We are not doing things properly, okay? Always things can be done, but in a better way. If you don't react, we could see violence, we could see the effects of the environment degradation, the climate change. Well, I think we all are aware of that. But well, they say that I think they said governments should do more. This is something controversial. Some will say yes, some will say no. And well, I think this book makes you think. I don't want to be simplistic. It is much more than this. There are a lot of points they analyze. And of course, I think it's a good book, makes you think. And well, perhaps, and I would like to know your opinion, you young people. And it is something I used to say. And I think the last time I said this was yesterday at university, or the last week. I prefer evolution to revolution.
Yeah, right. Gradual change.
Yes.
Then drastic. Because it's difficult, no? So the idea that you can make it better with the click of a finger overnight is not very likely. But the idea that we can make things gradually better is much more likely.
The Beatles said this back in the USSR. We all want to change the world. Yes, we all want to change it for good. But it's that complex mechanism that if we touch a part of it and we think we are doing this change for good, perhaps finally the system that has an internal order that sometimes not even is apprehensible for us, we may destroy it, or not destroy it, but change it and see unintended consequences. And of course, if we have to change the world, let's change it. But yes, you mentioned that gradually and thinking a lot, and of course, with sharing by a huge part of the population the changes we want. Social contract. A social contract cannot be imposed by a minority or even by an important part of the population if it is not representative of all the population as well. They are so important values that must be widely shared.
Exactly.
So say the last sentence, Bren.
Well, oftentimes they say also evolution, then revolution. No, so no doubt revolution is necessary at times, but oftentimes it happens after gradual changes first instead of all of a sudden.
Okay, perhaps next week we could continue speaking about Thomas Piketty.
Okay, sounds good.